Welcome to episode 148 of Clarity Compressed. My name is Paul J. Daly, and today we're talking to the one and only Ty Montague about what it is to be a story doer. We're making our way through the fog of life, and clarity is understanding where we are on the map. You are here.
Let the good times roll.
This is Clarity Compressed. So this week I'm excited. I'm not going to belabor this intro because we need to get into this conversation because you need to hear it. We're coming out of 2020. We're ramping into 2021, and people don't care about the things that you say. They care about the things that you do. And Ty Montague is somebody who has been involved in the branding and the story initiatives of major companies, global brands. He's helped establish some of the biggest agencies in the world. And so Ty is going to share with us this thesis that he started 10 years ago that I think is more relevant today, and also give us a very specific diagnostic tool for us and our businesses. And that principle is called story doing. You know, people don't care about what you say. They care about what you actually do, right? Don't tell me, show me. It's easy to get caught up in saying things that you think people are going to like to hear. But Ty talks about how more than ever, consumers want to do business with a company that is doing things that are in alignment with their beliefs. So without any further ado, here is my conversation with the one and only Ty Montague. Ty, it is so great to spend a few minutes with you today, and thanks for giving some of your time to me and the Clarity Compressed audience.
Oh, it's so great to be here. I love your podcast, and I'm excited to have this conversation.
I really appreciate that. And one of the reasons I think this is such a timely conversation is because coming out of 2020, which I think that a lot of people are ready to leave in the dust, and heading into 2021, it's really just a natural time where people reset. People reset personally, they reset professionally, and I think it's a great time coming out of a pandemic to reset your brand and what your company is doing. So you have done so much work. You've worked for some of the biggest brands in the world. What do you think? We're going to talk about story doing, but right now, what do you think is the biggest opportunity for brands coming out of this 2020 pandemic craziness and heading into 2021?
Oh, I think the biggest opportunity for any brand and any individual is to really think hard about what they want to stand for in the future. It's incredibly important in the world today to have a point of view. There was a long time in the branding world where brands wanted to appeal to everybody. The idea was don't offend anybody, don't take a position, don't stand for anything too, um, you know, too clearly or too forcefully, because you'll leave people behind. And today, that has flipped on its head. People want to know exactly what you stand for and exactly what you believe, in some cases, even your politics, so that they know whether they want to do business with you or not. And so this is a chance to really take stock and decide what you want to stand for in the future.
Do you think that has any exceptions? Like, like I think of mass market products, CPG versus, maybe some other things like clothing lines or, fashion or content. Do you have any differentiations or ones that stand out more? Like, okay, these might need that stand for something a little less than others. How does that sound? I'm just curious because you think about this stuff so much.
Yeah, well, I would say it depends on how loyal you want your customers to be. What kind of relationship do you want with them, right? In the auto business, right? This is a business that wants to appeal to as many people as it possibly can. But then along comes Tesla, and Tesla is like, hey, we believe in the, upending the hydrocarbon economy and ushering in a new sustainable electric future. Come along with us. We'll open up our patents as an act to bring people in, other competitors included, because we really believe this is a revolution. But we are definitely going to pick a fight with the traditional automotive industry. And you might say, well, Tesla is still a pretty small car company compared to the other car companies. But looking into the future, I would say if you're a big car company and you're trying to stand for the status quo, Tesla has you in their sights, and I would watch out for that. And as a result, because they've really taken a position in the world, Tesla owners are intensely loyal and excited about that brand.
That's a that's an interesting one because, obviously Tesla just crossed 600 billion in market value, which is more than the big three all combined together, right? And Tesla, very relatively young company compared to those. Um,
Yes.
and even thinking about that, I feel like Tesla, as an example, I wonder how many Tesla drivers drive a Tesla because of the belief in the upending the hydrocarbon, system, and how many do it because it's a fashion statement or a style statement. Like Elon Musk is someone who loves to pick a fight, and there's almost like this rebel spirit in him where people might follow him because of that. Obviously, a big part of their brand is Elon. Um, so you bring that up, and I'm just kind of like processing in real time as you're talking about it. But I do see what you're saying. They have a fiercely loyal base, and for sure it's because they believe in something. And not only do
Yeah.
they believe in something, but you can see very clear evidence of their acting on their belief.
Well, I don't want to digress too far, but one of the, I'll just name names. I did a project many years ago with Infinity,
Hmm.
and they at the time Tesla was even smaller than they are today. Tesla's much more successful than they were. They hadn't even launched the Model 3,
Oh wow,
but back
yeah,
then Infinity was shocked when the S launched, and so many people who were Prius owners went and bought S's, and they were like, "Wait, wait, 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 wait! If you're driving a Prius, how could you possibly afford an S?" And the point was, there were people driving Priuses who could afford anything, but they were driving Priuses because they liked the statement that made
it was the
about
belief.
their point of view on the world, right? And so suddenly a better car became available, and they chose it.
Wow,
That helped them transmit that same belief.
that's a really clear articulation of that's not a digression. It's a really clear articulation of your point that it,
Yeah.
it wasn't a status symbol. In a sense, it was an expression of their belief, right? It wasn't a
It
financial
was.
symbol because a Prius is anything but a status symbol or I guess it's
Yeah, it
cool.
was a
It's cool
board
in its own way, but no one gets
in
a
its own
Prius.
way, in a
No
special
one
way,
gets a
right? It's
Prius thinking
this
like,
little econo box thing that,
yes.
like, but it makes a statement.
And the belief is what was driving people's purchasing in that
Yes.
instance, and that was shocking. Well, that I think that's a really good transition because you pioneered, championed this concept called story doing. And I did a lot of looking into your work, and I'm very impressive, and I think it makes a lot of sense. But maybe you could explain why story doing is something that we all should be paying attention to.
Sure. Yeah. So I want to start with a little bit of history because it'll help. I
Please.
spent many years in the traditional advertising and marketing business. I helped lots of brands tell their stories, mostly using paid media, 30 and 60-second commercials. Companies like Coke and Nike and ESPN
A
and
couple mom and
JetBlue, and
pops. Yeah, a couple mom and pops.
Mercedes Benz. I've been very fortunate to work with some of the best brands in the world, and I finally realized that, this wasn't an immediate revelation. This happened over years. I began to get uncomfortable with the fact that it was possible for a company to tell one story using paid media and do another story, really through the actions that they were taking in the world. The most extreme example of that would be BP, who tried to rebrand themselves. It stands for British Petroleum, but they tried to make BP stand for Beyond Petroleum and talk like they were a new energy company. And then the Horizon,
The spill.
what's it called? Yeah, the Horizon spill in
Yeah,
the Deepwater Horizon
there you
spill
go.
happened in the Gulf of Mexico, and it became clear that they hadn't really changed very much at all, and they took a huge hit as a result.
Hmm.
And so I started to think about what would you have to do to build a company that helped companies really decide what they wanted to stand for in the world and help them then walk that talk to actually take action and have their actions align with their words.
Hmm.
So we launched Co Collective 10 years ago, and that's our thesis. We help leadership teams define and align on what we call a quest. What is the higher belief that you're trying to pursue, the social or environmental good that you're trying to do in the world? And then how do you make that real through your customer experience, through the products that you make, the services that you provide, in some cases, your business model? And I believe that it's important for all companies to think this way just because it's become increasingly clear that we face a bunch of really hard problems in the world, and we are in a place where the traditional institutions, government and things like that, are behind in their ability to help us address those problems. And I think some of those problems can be addressed by for-profit companies that really takes their role in the wider community and in the wider world seriously. And I believe that and there's already evidence for this. This isn't just a belief system, that younger consumers, millennials, are voting with their wallets. And so if you want to create a relationship with young millennial consumers, you need to decide what you stand for as a business. Otherwise, they're going to pass you by.
Yeah, you say this, and I even thinking back, I mean, I can't remember when exactly Deepwater Horizon was. About 10 years ago, maybe
Yeah,
longer than
that's
that.
right. About 10.
About
Yeah,
10
in
years
there.
ago. And so you had this situation where it was so big, right? A big oil rig out in the Gulf of Mexico, if you're not familiar with it. It blew up. Something went wrong. There were a lot of safety things that led up to the negligence that led to it. But it was just pumping thousands or millions of gallons of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. And we were watching as a nation, like feeling like we can't do anything about
Helpless.
this. Right.
Helpless. Right.
And so,
Worst oil spill in the history of oil spills,
right. I
like
mean, there was an
oil
element like
spill
waiting for
ever.
Bruce Willis and his team of oil mechanics to come in and like they
Right,
already blew up the
exactly.
asteroid. Like they can't put a cap on this thing. And so we're watching this, but it took something that big and that fantastic to get all of our attention and now highlight, what was actually going on in BP. And now, even just 10 years later, it's almost like there's nowhere to hide as a business because of social media and the speed of information and the level by which people can communicate. They can talk to one another. They can live stream if I'm in the store. I can whistle blow. I can do all these things because of the speed. So your thesis 10 years ago has never been more relevant, I don't think, because there's always somebody watching. So it's almost like actions speak louder than words, right? And if we're telling people what we're about, that's great. But we have more capability these days to actually see what you're about. And we're pretty good actually at spotting a fraud these days.
Thanks. Exactly. No, that's dead right. We live in the era of transparency, and so if you think you're going to hide, you're wrong, and that's only going to get worse. And so, companies that try to pull the wool over people's eyes are going to get punished. And so, why not get on board? I mean, some of what's been interesting when we launched 10 years ago, it was a little lonely talking about purpose. We didn't invent it. I don't want
Voice
to,
crying in the wilderness. Yes.
yeah, it was a little lonely. People looked at us a little funny, but today, you have like the CEO of BlackRock, which is one of the largest investment companies in the world, putting out his letter to CEOs, which is he does it annually, and
Yep.
and CEOs of some of the largest companies in the world follow this closely.
Yeah.
Has said BlackRock will no longer invest in a company that cannot articulate its social or environmental purpose. And I would say there's no better example than that to prove that this has gone mainstream, that this is now where you need to be. It's sort of table stakes.
Well, that I think I've seen that letter before in previous years. I haven't seen the most recent
Yeah.
one. And that is very impactful if BlackRock took that stance as a shot across the bow to anyone who would, really desire investment from that level, right? So, and that's a whole range of companies. That's not just like a certain segment. That's across the board. And
Totally.
so sometimes on this podcast, we've had guests and listeners who are CEOs of publicly traded companies. We
Of course.
have guests and listeners who are just, figuring out what their startup's going to be.
Scrappy entrepreneurs.
Scrappy
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, mom and pops, auto dealers. We have all types of business owners and aspiring business owners listening.
Sure.
How can we start to think in the terms of being a story doer? Like, it's great. We believe it. How do we start?
Well, so we've developed a tool to help companies like self-diagnose, right? Because there is no such thing as a pure story doer. There are very few, and there are very few pure storytellers. Most businesses exist along a continuum. And so we've created a tool called the Six Questions.
Can I stop you right there? What do you mean when you say a pure story doer?
So a company that can answer all six of these questions in the
Gotcha.
affirmative, right?
Okay.
And so
Yes.
I'll go through them
Perfect.
and then we can chat about them. But
Gotcha.
so the first question is, do you have a story, right? And if you're a small company, if you're a scrappy entrepreneur, you've built a product, you've built a team, you are time constrained, you have not thought a lot probably about the story that you're trying to convey to the world. And that's understandable, but I'm just here to say it is worth your time to think about what you want to stand for 10 years in the future. Think about that. Think about how you want to be remembered, is another way to think about it. And if you're a big company, most big companies have multiple stories, but no one codified version of that story. The second question is, does your story define an ambition beyond commercial aspiration? Is it a quest? Are you trying to make some big, generous, positive change in the world, right? Does it transcend just making a lot of money?
So does that mean
Uh,
like the companies who have a mission statement that say we want to generate amazing experiences for our customers and positive returns for our shareholders, right?
yeah, right.
No greater purpose or no higher purpose. It's just
Not good
we're gonna
enough.
please customers so we can make money.
Not good enough,
Nothing wrong with
right?
that, but
Nothing wrong with it.
it's
That's
not
right.
going to cut moving
But
forward.
in order to exactly, and in order to actually do that, you now need to be trying to do something bigger or higher than that. And so the third question is, does your story define a clear enemy? Because, it's often really helpful to define not only what you're for, but what you're against. Some of your, if you think about your favorite movie, your favorite play, your favorite book, think about the villain in that story, because it's often the villain that makes the story really exciting and compelling and hard to turn away from. Think about Darth Vader in Star Wars, right? Luke Skywalker was cool, but Skywalker was way cooler because Darth Vader was so scary,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
So what is your enemy? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a competitor. It can be an idea, it can be an industry, it can be a feeling. But
Right.
what are you getting out of bed every day to change about the world?
Almost, would you say the enemy could be kind of borrowing from some of Donald Miller's work, but be like an injustice could be the enemy,
Yes,
right?
exactly. Exactly.
Not a person, not a
Injustice in
thing, but a terrible thing that must be defeated.
a world state, or an emotional state, or a system that is in the way of people achieving, happy lives. Yeah, those are all great enemies. So the fourth question is your story being used to drive innovation throughout the company? People often think that about, a vision statement or a mission statement as something that you carve on the wall in your lobby, or you write it down and it goes on into the desk drawer. A quest, a really good long-term aspiration to do good in the world should drive your every action that you take in the business, right? You should be thinking about it when you design your products, when you think about your services, in some cases when you define your business model. And it can also define communications. We're not anti-communication. It's just you shouldn't start there first.
Hmm.
Um, the fifth question is, have you defined a few transformative innovations to focus on, or actions is another way to think about it. A great example of that is CVS. When they pivoted to being a wellness company, they realized that they could not, it's now called CVS Health and Wellness, they could not, in good conscience, continue to sell cigarettes because that was completely dissonant with their
That's
new
great.
purpose in the
Yeah,
world.
I never noticed that change. I mean, I noticed the change in CVS, their branding and kind of their positioning, but it was about what they stopped doing.
Exactly. They gave up $2 billion in revenue from tobacco money. And this is a publicly traded company. That is a non-trivial
Wow.
decision for a CEO. And so they did that, and they've now made that money back up based on the goodwill that it generated. It also generated a ton of media for
Mhm.
them because
Yeah.
people were very interested that they were making this, kind of audacious move. Um, and the last question is, and this is kind of the acid test, they kind of go up in degree of
Oh
difficulty.
yeah.
Right? And number six is, are people outside your company engaging with and actually participating in the story, right? Do have you succeeded in creating something that feels like a movement where people, your customers, feel like they're joining you in your quest, and they're actually in some cases meeting each other and meeting up to pursue your quest along with you as a business. And there are great examples of that. REI is an example of a company that believes in going outside, and they want all of their employees and all of their customers to engage in that. So they do an audacious thing every year, which is close their stores on Black Friday instead of keeping them open to maximize sales, um, as an iconic action to say, no, we want everyone to participate in this. We mean it, right? And we're willing to put our money where our mouth is.
Wow. Okay. So these are six, and it sounds like you recommend like you start at the beginning, right? If you have that, then you can move because is it
Exactly.
because I guess it's very unlikely that someone would, I mean, not impossible, but unlikely that someone would have number five and six happening if there wasn't some level of clear articulation in the beginning.
Yeah, they're kind of accretive. You kind of have to start with number one. And then when you've got that down, make sure it checks the box of number two, and you kind of move through all six. And if you can answer all six in the affirmative, then you are what we would call a pure story doing company. But most companies exist somewhere along that line. And all the tool does then, if you ask yourself those questions, is it helps you decide where to focus your energy in your own journey of transformation.
So this is incredibly helpful. And I'm not a big fan of New Year's resolutions because if it's just a resolution I resolve to do, that never
Yeah,
really happens. You need some level of substantive planting your feet to the ground and at least commitment to certain steps that make kind of ensure that you're going to go through that. And this six steps right here, at least six, this diagnostic tool even could serve as a bit of a New Year's, well, I'll call it a resolution, but a New Year's initiative to
yep,
say, I'm going to just spend some time and go through these questions and
yep,
I'm going to present them to my leadership team and see what we think. Because I think most people, when they look at their business, they, they understand why they do it. They've
yep.
just not taken the time to articulate it.
To write it down. That's right. And that's another reason, this might be an aside, but it's another reason why so many companies, you notice a pattern like the founder, if a company gets really big and successful, but the founder is still there, then the founder leaves. Often those companies feel like they get lost, and
Right.
many of them run out of steam and wind up getting acquired or going away. And that's because all of that instinctive stuff that lived inside the founder left with the founder, and nobody took the time to actually codify it and write it down and make sure that everyone understood it and knew what to do with it. And so this is another way of thinking about making your company a company, whether it's a small company or a big company, something that has real longevity to it.
Sure. Legacy and staying power. Yeah, I think all of us have known those people and been around those people. Like, hey, when they're around, I just am kind of become a better version of myself. And that's true in organizations as well. And it's very
Yeah,
easy probably to underestimate the power that that person has in there driving it, even if they're not directly saying something or doing something every day. The whole vibe changes around them. So this is a way that you can kind of bottle that up and make sure that it outlasts any one person, because really a brand is extremely vulnerable in a situation like that if the culture is really kind of held closely by a few people as the driver.
absolutely right. Great point.
Well, this has been a great conversation. I can't wait to share this. Do these six things, these diagnostic tools, does this live somewhere on your website?
They are on the website, and there's also a separate website because there's a whole. We've done a study. These, if you are able to answer these 6 questions in the affirmative, um, we went looking for evidence that it was actually a better way to run your business. And so there's a website called storydoing.com where you can check out the results of that study and see how answering these questions can make you a better business. And then, the other place to look is at cocollective.com. That's a good place to start.
So we'll link all this up, but that's cocollective.com.
Correct.
So
Yes.
storydoing.com, cocollective.com. Ty,
Yep.
what's the best way for people to stay connected with you? Because you're not a company, you're a person.
Sure, I am a person. You can follow me on Instagram, although it's at T Montague, but that's mostly personal stuff. And then business stuff, LinkedIn is a good place to find me. Just Ty Montague.
And before we go, tell me, who is your all-time favorite story doing organization?
Oh man,
I
that
know
is
that's like
really
asking a music lover, what's the best guitar solo ever?
no, I know.
We won't hold you
That
to
is
this.
a
This isn't saying there isn't a close competitor, but what's one that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, just one of my favorites has always been. Well, I'll go back to the beginning. Tesla. This is a company, and I don't want to pick a fight with any of your listeners, also because I know there are a lot of folks in the car business, and I know
It's
Tesla's
not
a
a fight.
controversial company.
It's your
But
reality.
I just really love the way Elon Musk just all up is a story doer in his bones,
Mhm.
and I love how he um, continues to just challenge the world with the companies that he puts out there and manages to actually execute on ideas that lots of people have talked about over time, but he has found a way to actually put them into the world and make them happen. And he seems to be fearless about trying things, even when they don't work.
That's
He's
true.
had some failures in his career as well. So I would say Elon Musk, I'm kind of a fanboy.
Mhm.
But he would be number one.
Well, that's great. And hey, look, if you're an auto dealer and you're diametrically opposed to Elon Musk and Tesla, then Ty has just delivered you the perfect villain that your story doing can overcome. So either way,
Exactly.
I think it's
Go
a
beat
win.
him. Go beat him. Yeah.
So, Ty, thanks again for just spending some time with us in the audience today, just helping us to get our minds around what it is to live what we believe in a different way.
Paul, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me.
When Ty said this diagnostic goes in order and it will tell you where you are, the bell went off in my head, the ding, the clarity bell. Because very rarely do you get a diagnostic tool that you can actually get some perspective instantly on how close you are to actually living through your organization what your stated beliefs are. So I think if you're an aspiring entrepreneur, if you're a small business, medium-sized business, if you're a CEO of a publicly traded company, if you go through these 6 questions, and we're going to link them up below, I think that you will immediately have better perspective on how far along you are in actually living your beliefs. So I hope you do that again. And he also referenced in there storydoing.com, this website where they show the research in the success of companies who actually have been proven to be story doers versus storytellers. It is easy to say things, and in marketing kind of has a bad rep for, bait and switch. Let me tell you what you want to hear and then actually give you and do something else. Well, I think that season is now moving away, and we're moving into this world, as Ty says, where people really, really, really care about what you're actually doing to move their beliefs forward. So thanks again for spending some time with me today and some time with Ty. Please hit him up on social media. He will answer you. He said LinkedIn is a great place. So Ty Montague on LinkedIn, just search it. We'll link it up below in the description as well. And until then, man, we only have a couple of weeks left until the end of this year. So whatever you're doing to wrap up 2020, I hope that it involves actually writing things down, because until you take it out of your mind, just a dream, just a vision, just an aspiration, those are great, but they don't go anywhere if you don't write them down. So I know, I'm a big fan of writing things down, but this is a great excuse to do it pretty easily. Answer the 6 questions, just write it down. And I think that you'll have one helpful, meaningful step closer to what it is that you actually want to be doing. Thanks again. I will see you next week.
You just gotta